Sato ma sadagamaya tamaso homaham jyotirgamaya riturmam amritam gamaya avir ahavir maidhi Rudra yate dakshinam mukha te namaham pahini tyam. Lead us from the unreal to the real. Lead us from darkness unto light. Lead us from death to immortality and reach us through and through ourselves, and evermore protect us from ignorance by thy sweet, compassionate face. So my subject this morning is the power to be. And I take my title from an article by San Francisco Swami Vedarupananda in the Voice of India, where they're discussing some verses from the Narayana Upanishad and the different expressions of power or of the divine Shakti. Let's begin at the beginning. That is, you are the Atman, the spirit, pure consciousness, localized, reflected in the intellect. That is yourself. That is the intelligence, the reason within us. We have so many different interpret information and input from the senses to determine what is good and what is right. And then, if we have a well-ordered psyche, our consciousness will flow naturally towards the good. Consciousness is energy, it's attention, and attention is just energy. When you put your attention on it, the energy flows and begins to resonate with the cells and with the tissues and with the muscles, and you begin to move and to take action. So the consciousness within us is the spirit, and the willpower to move and to act is the spirit in action. We have within us a power. It's called volition. The power to initiate actions and then to persevere with that action until we reach our goal. We take it for granted, but really it's a divine power. And there's an old legend about Shankaracharya, who is the father of Vedanta non-dualism. And in his 16th year, he went to Benares, that is the seat of learning in India, where he was teaching the Advaita Vedanta philosophy, the fundamental teaching that this world is unreal, that Brahman alone is real. And he was arguing with philosophers to establish this philosophy. He had no interest in power and in Shakti and in creation or in this world. And one day, as he was bathing in the river Ganges at the Manikarnika Ghat, he came up out of the water and suddenly he just collapsed. He collapsed there on the stone, the steps there of the Ghat, and he couldn't move. He couldn't move his arms, couldn't move his legs. He weakly cried for some help, but he being a very high caste Brahmin, nobody would be allowed to even to touch him, to help him. So there he lie. And then there came to that ghat a very young girl, and maybe she was 14 years old. And she came slowly towards the ghat, and he called out to her. He said, "Mother, please help me. I don't have the power to move." And the girl looked at him and she smiled. And she said, "What's that you say, sir? You don't have the power to move?" And then she began to smile and to laugh. And the laughter began to vibrate with the stones of that ghat and with the water and with the buildings, and everything was shaking and trembling as if the whole universe was going to collapse. And Shankaracharya realized, oh, this is the Divine Mother. Great temples there in Banaras, to Annapurna, and the divine temples to Shiva and to Shakti. After that incident, he wrote a famous poetic work called the Ashtakam. What's it called? The something Ashtakam. No, that's not that. It's called the something. The Ashtakam. Beautiful, like eight verses. And after that, when he left, he had another 16 years of teaching, wandered all the whole of India, and writing beautiful, visiting temples, writing beautiful hymns into the Divine Mother. That is the power within us, which is what we're kind of our subject this morning. We're talking about the power to do, and the power to resist, and the power to be. So Shankaracharya, we take this power to, similar thing happened in the biography of Sri Ramakrishna, with Totapuri, a great teacher of Dvaita Vedanta. He came to Dakshineshwar. Sri Ramakrishna was a devotee of the Divine Mother. He'd go there to the temple. When he came out, he would often clap his hands and sing the name and glories of the Mother. And Totapuri looked at him, you see, and he says, what are you doing there? Are you making chapatis? Kind of a humorous reference to say, and because he didn't accept the power of the divine power, didn't fit into his philosophy. Well, one night as he was meditating, he found that day he had contracted this terrible dysentery. And so all day long, he's struggling against that. And the next day, finally one evening, sitting before the Dhuni fire in the Panchavati, it became so, he was trying to merge his mind into a higher state, into samadhi. But he kept, the dysentery, the pain kept drawing his mind downward. And so finally he just thought to himself, okay, well, I've realized that I'm not the body, I'm not the mind. I'll just end it all. I'll go to wade drown myself in the river Ganges. And so he went over the Dakshineshwar temple right on the river Ganges. So he went over down there and he began to wade into the water. Now at that point, it's maybe half a mile across. That is this river, and great steamers from the ocean going vessels ply through the rivers, so very deep. He began to walk into the water, step after step. He closed his eye in a meditative mode, step after step after step. After a while, he opened his eyes. He found he was in the middle of the river. He was only ankle deep. Realized at that point that there is a power beyond my own will that is kind of the power of Mother Nature. Seems to have decided otherwise. He came back to the Dakshineshwar temple, and from then on he went over the Kali temple, and from then on he became a kind of a convert to this divine Mother Shakti. So this is the power to do. We're talking about Tamas expressions here of power. Tamasic, Rajasic, Sattvic. That is the lower, the medium, and the higher power. The power to do, which we take for granted. But we can see that all in the 10th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, there's a beautiful verse where it says that whenever you look all around you and you see people who've achieved things, they've worked and they've accomplished and they've done great things, and maybe they become celebrities and they're like sparkling lights, they're like the stars in the sky. He says, wherever you see such people, he says, look around and see, then you know that these are just sparks of my splendor. The Sri Krishna speaking there in the Bhagavad Gita, that is the divine. Sparks of the reflections, as it were, of the divine power. Now, in order to do anything, we also have to resist doing what we want to do and accomplish what we want. But in order to do that, we would have to be able to avoid that what we don't want. That is, we'd have to have the power to resist. It's kind of a higher power, which appears in the mind, which is kind of more as we are spiritual aspirants doing our spiritual practice. We know very well that in all the lives of the saints, that's the part of the story of the quest for self-knowledge and self-realization. Part of the story is that they have to. They are faced with great temptations along the way, and they have to overcome those temptations in order to succeed. In the Katha Upanishad, begins with the story of Nachiketas, the young boy who was his father, Ujjayi Shravas. He was doing a great sacrifice in the part of the sacrifices that you have to offer to God. All the best and most best things that you own are gathered together and are made an offering to God. And so he was gathering these articles that he had. He had some cows, of course, that is wealth in those days, his cows. And what he had assembled there for the offering, only the weakest and the cows that were barren of any calves. And the young boy, Nachiketa, seeing this, he said, Father, he said, what is, this is not the way. I thought that the idea was that you were supposed to offer the best of everything that you have. You're offering those cows. And what about me? To whom are you going to offer me? And then the father looked at him. It's unbelievable, because the son never dares to question the father in ancient times. And so he looked at him, he says, to you, for being such an impertinent boy, to you I give you to death. That means you go to the lower place. And Nachiketas, just a young boy. And he thought, okay, well, my father said that I have to go down into the netherworld. Okay, so that's what I'll do. And so he left home and he went down into the lower worlds that are ruled by Yama. That means the god of death. And there, when he came to the house of death, no one was home. And so he waited 1 day, waited 2 days, waited 3 days. Finally, Yama returned, and he was chagrined to see that there was a high caste Brahmin who'd been waiting there for 3 long days without food, without water. That's a great sin for a householder. And so he said, yes, please forgive me. I'll give you 3 boons. And so Nachiketas, what was his first boon? His first boon, may my father not be angry with me anymore. That was his first. The second boon, teach me the secrets of the fire sacrifice. It'll take me into the heavenly worlds. Both were granted, and this third boon was teach me the knowledge of the Atman, that is the true self. And Yama, hearing that, he said, no, I can't do that. That's a very high secret knowledge. He said, you're not ready to receive that knowledge yet. But Nachiketa says, I'll give you something else, he said. I'll make you ruler of the world. I'll give you horses and chariots and dancing girls and songs. Boy listened to him. He says, yours be the horses, yours be the dancing song. What I want is the answer to my third boon. Tell me the nature of the self. And so that's the opening chapters there of the Katha Upanishad. The rest are just the teachings of Yama about the nature of our true self, the Atman. But we see that Nachiketas, he had the power of resistance. That is, he was temptation. It's like Jesus on the Mount, tempted by the devil. And a great expression there of the power. 3 times he was tempted. But that higher power manifested to resist temptation. Unlike Nachiketas, there was a famous sage in ancient times, and his name was Vishwamitra. Vishwamitra was a king, but he renounced his kingdom because he wanted to become a sage. And there's different kinds of sages. There's the Rajarshi, and then there's the Brahmarshi. And so he renounced his kingdom, went into the forest, and he began to do spiritual practices, and he began to do tapas alone in the forest. And years passed, and time passed into 1,000 years. And he was accumulating more and more power. Meanwhile, the gods in heaven, Indra, the king of the gods, seeing that this sage was accumulating power, the whole series of these stories, because he used to create alternative heavens, they became fearful that Vishwamitra would gain more power. And so they sent there a divine nymph. That means like an apsara from heaven. Her name was Menaka. And there she came. She was dancing. On her shoulder, she had a cuckoo bird. That means like the god of love in the form of a bird. And she began to dance and she began to sing. And Vishwamitra opened his eyes from his meditations. And he just saw her, and he listened to that music, and he just fell in love. And they were married. And they had a child, little girl child. Her name was Shakuntala. And then Vishwamitra, it began to dawn on him how far he had fallen from his previous aspirations to become a Rajarshi and a Brahmarshi. And so he just left his wife, Menaka. But she didn't care, because she's a goddess. She's like a divine apsara. She just disappeared into heaven. And Shakundala, the young girl, she was just left there in the forest. She was found by a hunter, took her, and she later married, became the mother of King Bharata, the father of modern India. So, meanwhile, Vishwamitra, he's lost all of his power, and so this time he went deeper and deeper into the forest. And now he's being lying. He says in there doing tapas day after day, year after year. Just only drinks water. He just eats leaves, and the sun, the rain, and the wind. And the time passes, and years pass. 1,000 years pass, and now he's gained great power again. He's on the verge of becoming a Rajarshi. And Indra, the Lord of the gods, seeing that this has happened, he's got to prevent this. So he sends another temptation, that is Ramba, another Apsara, came down from heaven. And Vishwamitra's meditating there. He hears the sound of the anklets of the dancing girl. He opens his eyes, and he realized once again another temptation. He was so vexed. He was so angry with the gods. Just fire came out of his eyes. And he cursed her, that is Ramba, to be turned into a stone. She became stone. But as a result of that curse, he lost all of the power and all of the tapas that he accumulated all those years. And so he had to go back again to square one. This time he went further into the forest, began to live again just on air, drinking water. Time passed and years passed. Again, 1,000 years passed, and again he was tempted by two, Ramba and Tilotama. Both of them now came down. Seeing them, though, he opened his eyes. Now he had accumulated, after that time, the power of resistance. And so he smiled when he saw them. He said, yes, welcome. Sing and dance. Enjoy the song and the dance. As for me, I will just be withdrawn into meditation. Closed his eyes. And so, with that power, he was able to transcend that final temptation. So, we're talking about power. These are kind of the divine power that within us, the power of our spiritual practice to resist those things which are obstacles to our spiritual path. And so now we're talking here about the power to do. These are discussed here in the Mahanarayana Upanishad. The power to do, the power to resist, a higher power. 3 forms of Shakti. The higher power, the power to be. That is when that which is active becomes merged in that which is the active, the static, and the dynamic. The dynamic merges into the static. The active becomes potential. And Sri Ramakrishna says the snake is like a power. It's like a snake, Shiva and Shakti, like the snake and its wriggling motion. So that when the wriggling motion stops, then only the snake remains. This is the power to be. It's the same snake. But now it's just it's not the power to do or to resist or manifest, but just the power to be. Now, what does that mean? It seems that, well, first, it seems it's an incomplete statement. The power to be what? And we could say, well, it just means the power to be here now, or the power to be who you really are. And maybe we can think of that incident comes to mind there of Swami Brahmananda in Uttar Kashi. He got gone off, living alone in the forest, in the foothills of the Himalayas. And there he was meditating in that, meditating in the forest, coming on to the winter months. It's so cold up there in the Himalayan mountains. And so he's sitting there, his eyes are half open, and a traveler came along that way, and seeing, he was a merchant, and he had some shawls, some very rich, expensive shawls, and he thought to himself, oh, there's the Swami, it must be cold here. Let me leave an offering here of a shawl for him. So he went over and he put that blanket in front of him as an offering. And then he went on his way. Swami Brahmananda observing this, he looks there, eyes half open, kind of vaguely sees this shawl. A little time passes. He doesn't do anything. Time passes. And another traveler came by that way. And well, he was a thief. He looked around, he saw that Swami, and he saw that expensive shawl, and he thought, well, he's a monk, he doesn't need that shawl. So he went over, he took it, and he just went on his way. And meanwhile, Swami Brahmananda, he just sat there. The witness, that is we can think of the witness consciousness just being, unmoved, without likes or dislikes, same-sided, unreactive. This is embodied here in the figure now of, not of Shiva, Shiva and Shakti, that's what we hear, but this is a Vaishnava Upanishad, that is the Mahanarayana Upanishad, and so the God here is Narayana, that is Vishnu. So in other words, this is a godlike power of being the witness, of being just the power to be. We read in Zen Buddhism, for example. I'm trying to think of examples here of this power to be. There's a young novice, comes to the monastery, and he's trying to do spiritual practice, and he's trying to meditate. But he goes to his teacher, he says, I'm having so much difficulty. So many, it's too hot. If it's hot, I can't meditate. When it's too cold, I can't meditate. What can I do? And then this is the Zen master. There he looks there at the disciple. He said, well, why don't you go, if you go to a place where it is neither hot nor cold. And if you can't meditate, it's hot, you can't cold, go to a place where it is neither hot nor cold. And the disciple says, well, what is that? Where is that place? Where would that be? And then the master says, well, when it's hot, be hot. When it's cold, be cold. This is the manifestation of the power to be. That is, be present. Be here now. Be who you really are. This is a favorite analogy in the Buddhist literature, Zen Buddhist literature, about employing the mind as a mirror. The mind is compared with think of a mirror. Things happen, events pass by in the world. And how does the mirror react? Well, it doesn't grasp. It doesn't refuse. It accepts, but it doesn't keep. It doesn't hold on to things. And therefore, if we can, that's the teaching, that to do spiritual practice, that we would employ our minds like a mirror. We think about the great, the founder of Zen Buddhism in Japan. I mean, not Japan, but it became Zen in Japan. In China, it was called Chan, same thing. The founder was Bodhidharma. He came from Ceylon in ancient times, almost 1,000 years after the Lord Buddha. He's the one who brought Buddha, this form of Zen Buddhism to China. And there he found himself a place to meditate near today. At one time, that is a famous monastery in the tradition of martial arts, the Shaolin Temple. Near to that temple, there is a cave. And that is, he didn't bring Buddhism to China. Buddhism was already there, but he had brought this form called Chan or Zen Buddhist tradition. So Bodhidharma, so the legend goes, he went into that cave and he just began to sit there. And he just sat there facing a wall. And he sat there for 9 years. And year after year went by, it didn't move. Just sat there, eyes half open. We could say, well, what was he doing? Well, what was he doing all that time? Or what was his state? Well, it's illustration here. It's an example of the power to be. Power to be. Let's look at it as a great Vedantic theme. Now we're going to get a little more philosophical here. Because let's look here at the word being. Being. What is being? Now we think about being. It's not the kind of question we think about every day, but what could be more fundamental than what is our being? By being, we mean, well, to be, to exist. It's kind of the universal predicate. Everything in the universe, either it is, if it is, it is, if it's not, it's not. So we don't know anything about it. So everything that is, and that's reality. What is reality? Reality is just everything. But then we think, well, but what is the essence of reality? And we think what question we're asking is how can it be? The idea of everything is kind of confusing because there's so many infinite number of things. What is it that all these things have in common? And that is, we have to do a reduction. That means get down to a primal reduction base. How would we reduce it all? To what we reduce it all? To the substratum. What is the substratum? That's what we call being. It's the substance of everything. It is that once you have the substance of everything, then you have that which doesn't change. Everything, the names and the forms change, but the substance never changes, and therefore it's real. Everything else, in comparison with the substance, is changing and transient, and therefore it's relatively unreal. In Vedanta, real here means it never changes. It's never sublated. It can't be reduced. It's the rock bottom. So the idea that there is a bottom. That's the idea of a substratum. That something can be reduced. It's just like a rainbow. We look at the rainbow. We say, well, the rainbow is an illusion. It doesn't really exist. There's no really a bow of colors in the sky. That's just that can be reduced to molecules of water and the play of it's an optical illusion. And therefore it can be reduced to water particles and light. And so we say that the rainbow is unreal, but there is a real base. So what is that real? So this is the teaching of Vedanta, that there is a reality, and the reality is the truth. There is a truth. There is a truth with a capital. There is a truth with a capital T. And truth is not an endless pursuit of an evolving, never-ending quest. There's an end, or there's an ultimate truth. Truth means the substratum. Truth means, by truth we mean that with a capital T, which never changes, that which is always true, which is true in the beginning, the middle, and the end. What is it that's always true? Well, we think, maybe, it's matter. We look around us, we have a word for that. Yeah, there's something which is universal, a substratum. We call it matter. And matter, of course, also is Vedanta. In Vedanta, by matter, we mean matter is just a word which means the primordial substance of what everything's made out of. So what is that? Matter is in Vedanta is called akasha. There's two things that everything is primordial matter and energy, prana and akasha. So what is this akasha? So the word akasha just means sky. It means space. And so what is matter literally is space. And we think, space is just, but by space, you see, they don't mean In Vedanta, it does not mean that it's just the emptiness between two things where there's nothing. There's space between the two things, there's space between it, means there's nothing there. That's emptiness. But this is not space. Space is a particle. That means this is Akasha, this whole universe. There is no emptiness in the universe. The universe is just packed, jam full. It's like a solid block of being. So that's just it's a being. We're asking a question. What is being? Because we're trying to understand, what is it? What is it? What does it mean, this power to be? What does that mean? We can kind of understand the power to do things. We understand the power within us to resist, but the power to be is that we're looking more deeply into what does that mean? Now let's just continue on with the Vedantic analysis. Because being is equated, and there's an equation of identity in Vedanta between being and consciousness. And that is being. What is being? Being is consciousness. Being is conscious awareness. And we think, well, consciousness, what is that? Well, we just say we have a body, we understand, we have a mind. But the idea is that deep within us, we have a body, mind, and a spirit. What is it? That is, there we have a nature. We have an essence. We have a spirit. We call it body, mind, and spirit. That's as we go deeper and deeper within ourselves, into the substratum of our being, then we would find, then the teaching is that it goes tamas, raj, sattva. What is sattva? Sattva is just spirituality. It's the spirit. So we have the body, and what is the spirit? The spirit is our self. It's our consciousness. It's the substratum. It's our being. And the Bhavani, I'm thinking about that stota written by Shankaracharya. I couldn't remember the Bhavani Ashtakam. That's what it's called. You want to look at beautiful. It's a beautiful 8 verses. The first hymn that he wrote I'm going back to Shankara now, we said there, the first hymn that he wrote to the Divine Mother, on that occasion, incorporating in his whole concept of Dvaita Vedanta. See, this teaching of power and Shakti is a very ancient teaching. It's there in the Upanishads, even though later it became a whole separate independent system. But if we go back far enough dig down into what is Vedanta, that means the source of all of our teachings, then we see that this idea of power is there and merged with the Shiva and the Shakti and the Shiva. That is in this Upanishad we're talking about Vishnu. Each god has a goddess, right? He's and so now we're talking Vedanta. Now we're talking what we've heard about is that there is the nature. What is the nature of being, of that substance? Well, it's infinite. You can't think that there's any kind of, it's just kind of logical. We can't think that there's anything beyond being, because that would be non-being, that would be non-existence. And nothing, whatever is, that's the old teaching of the Greek philosophers Parmenides. Whatever is. Whatever is not. And so if it's not, you don't have to worry about it. It doesn't exist. But what is, that is the being. And the being is the equation of identity between your being and your consciousness and your self and your spirit and the God within you. These are all terms. They're like fingers that are pointing to the ultimate reality. And so you have all these different fingers, they're all pointing to the same thing. That is your true nature, your awareness. And then this awareness, when we think about it, our awareness. What is our awareness? It's our being. I think I am conscious, I am aware. That's how we usually think, that I have awareness. I have the capacity. I'm thinking I have the power of consciousness. That is, but see, the idea is that consciousness is not something we have. It's not that you have consciousness and awareness, but that you are consciousness, that's yourself. This is Vedanta. This is the radical, the strong claim of Vedanta. Everybody admits that they were conscious. Nobody denies consciousness. But what is consciousness? Where did consciousness come from? Neuroscience is all about consciousness. That's on the cutting edge. What is consciousness? But their idea of consciousness is not the Vedantic idea of consciousness, because their idea of consciousness has emerged naturally from matter. But what is matter? You see, we said all this is just a block of being. We could call it matter, but we could call it mind, and we could call it spirit. Those are just words. Those are three words, really, which are just three fingers pointing to the same thing. When we see it through our senses, we call it matter. We're attached to the body and mind. And a lower level of vibration in our consciousness, we call it matter. That's what we see. We see reality, we call it matter. But when we raise our consciousness, then we begin to see that it's maybe call it mind. Saints and sages call it spirit. And that spirit also, that consciousness within us, the strong claim of Vedanta there, however, is not that it emerges from matter, but that it is yourself, that it's infinite, that it's the same as being, that it's infinite. You can't imagine. Well, you think about it, it's just logic. You can't imagine a place where there's no consciousness. You can't imagine it's a one thing. Well, that's the foundation really of Descartes and Western philosophy. I think, therefore I am. That was we can doubt everything in the world. And we can imagine that we're just dreaming it up, or it's just a figment of our imagination. It comes and it goes. But the one thing we cannot doubt is our own self, our own awareness, our own consciousness. And our own consciousness is there a place where this awareness is not? Well, we can't even think about it. We can't think about it, because wherever you think about it, well, there you are. So it is undeniable. That is, that consciousness is infinite. The consciousness is that reality it's infinite. And therefore, that's the nature of truth in Vedanta. What's true and what's real is that which cannot in the long run be contradicted. That is, all that we see in the waking state, we fall asleep at night, everything we know in the waking state disappears. So that can't be absolutely real. And similarly with our dream, everything is sublated in the waking state, but in the dream also. We go into deep sleep, all the dreams disappear. And so those things which change, which come and which go, cannot be absolutely real. And therefore the only real is the one that is the absolute. These are all words. You're just words. It sounds confusing because you have words like being and consciousness and reality and God and the matter and mind. These words all refer to the same thing. and that is yourself. That is your true nature. That is the Atman. Being consciousness, and because it's infinite, this Atman as well, this consciousness. What is consciousness? Consciousness, we can say, is it's just like light. It's the source of the light. We see things. How have we managed to see things? Well, the sun is shining. We see things in the dream. We see, but even in deep sleep, we are aware. That is, there's a source of knowing. That is, there's the metaphor here is light, and there's a source of light. That's the witness. That's what enables Swami Vedarupananda and all there to sit there completely detached. Why? Because he's abiding in that witness state. He sees things come. The shawl comes and the shawl goes. It doesn't bother him. And so that's a state of that's a light source. That's called in Vedanta, that's called ananda, that's called bliss. And bliss means, is another word that's pointing to the same thing. Bliss just means, the better word is not bliss. The better word is, better idea maybe would be peace, perfect peace, and perfect tranquility, and perfect stillness, like this. And so that's consciousness. That's being. That's the state of being. It's an infinite state of perfect stillness and silence, which is yourself, which is immortal because it's one only without a second. And so that's spirituality. What is that? That's God. We could call that's the impersonal God. That's Brahman. That's spirituality. That's the spirituality within us. That's what we're striving. If we could achieve that state, realize the God within us, then we could be like the Zen master, say, well, when it's hot, you're hot. You're cold, yeah. It's cold in here, yeah. It informs us. We know what the temperature is, but doesn't affect us. Why? Because your deeper identity is the identity, and I said it doesn't affect us. Well, it's like the ocean, on the surface. On the surface, there's waves, yeah. But you go deeper and deeper in our own psyche, then it's all stillness and silence. And so this is the kind of the goal of spiritual life, is to attain that, to realize our own being, our own consciousness, our own happiness within. We don't don't use the word happiness. Happiness just means satisfying desires. So happiness is not a good word. Our word that is Vedanta is bliss. It's peace. Peace means there's no desire. Happiness means you've satisfied the desire and the fire just burns hotter. So you don't want happiness. You want peace. You want stillness. You want consciousness. And that this is why maybe the best example of all this that we're talking about, that is the power to be, maybe the best example is you think of a saint or a sage in meditation. Think of like a Buddha statue. You go all over the whole world in gardens. What do you see? There's a Buddha statue there because it's like the perfect representation of the power to be. The sun's shining, the wind blows, and the rain falls, and that Buddha just sits there motionless, absorbed in his inner peace and stillness. And so that's our state. That is when we sit for meditation. We withdraw our minds, and we withdraw our senses from the external world, go into our mind, and begin to focus ourselves on the God within us. And now we're zeroing in on our own spirituality. That's when we're really being That's when we're being spiritual, pure per se, It's just when you're sitting there quietly, silently, meditating on your own self. Now, there's many manifestations of spirituality, but that comes to my mind is kind of like a best example I could think of. And that's why. Why is it that all these saints, that when we meditate on the lives of the saints, they're all pictured in meditation? They're not pictured out walking around doing stuff. And so that's the power to be. So we have three powers: the power to do, the power to resist, the power to be in evolution, grade. And our goal is to realize that and manifest that power within. Yeah.
Any questions?
Do we have time here? I don't know. We have a few
Maybe
minutes.
for one question or two.
Yeah, we have a few 1 or 2 minutes here. Somebody has some or commentary or disagreement or pushback. Yeah. Everybody else agrees. Nobody disagrees. Yes, sir. Yes. Ananda.
Okay, if no one is before me, I can ask him. Okay, Swamiji, the first example you gave of Vishwamitra, the person,
yeah.
the person who was tempted by the Apsaras.
Yeah.
So if you think it's an evolutionary process, the power to do, the power to resist, and the power to be, right? It's
Yeah.
not going. So I'm trying to understand. I'm trying to fit that story into this philosophy that when Vishwamitra was lured and he married that woman, so that was power to do, right? He did something, maybe.
Well, no, it's just a story. That's all.
Okay, yeah. Because
No, Vishwamitra is to illustrate the power to resist, not the power to do,
resist, okay,
right?
power.
And so he did not have the power. Just like he did not have the power to do is like Shankaracharya, but see, we're not like that. We have the power to do and to persevere, to initiate action and do things. But Shankaracharya didn't. That is, he was cut off at the source by the Divine Mother. Yeah,
that's right.
kind of cut him off at the power, unplugged the power at the source, so he couldn't even move. Now, unlike Shankaracharya, you see, Sri Ramakrishna says the wind of God's grace is always blowing. All we have to do is raise our sails. We don't have the power; is not unplugged in our lives. It's always there. Yeah.
Swamiji, thank you so much for being here.
Okay. Yeah.
My question is, if you are in extreme pain, what do you do? Do you offer that pain to the Lord as well, or how do you deal with that at those moments when it's extremely bad?
Well, that kind of goes back to our story there about the incident, the Zen story. These are stories about great saints and sages and their ideals, about how they react and kind of the ideal, perfect model of self-realization. And we are embodied souls. We have pains, we suffer. That's why we suffer. We pray to God. Yeah, we can pray to God.
But how
And
do
we
you
can,
go?
well, I don't know. I don't have any answer.
Okay.
No answer to the question. The answer is we suffer. We all agree to that. That's why we're spiritual aspirants. We want to transcend this world of suffering. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Good. Okay.